Hey, all right. So I just want to say thank you for taking the time to look at the host home training for life to life groups. This is meant for um, a refresher course for some folks that have already been through the training, or for those people who weren't able to make any of the live sessions. So we'll probably be together for about 30, 35 minutes. And I just appreciate you wanting to be a part of disciple making here at Adventure and taking the time to do this. So I'll be breaking this training up into two simple sections. First, the principles behind what we're doing and why we do it, and then the practical elements of what it means to be a host home at Adventure Christian Church. So let's go ahead and get started with the principles. The principles, the reason that we're going to be talking about this next section really is for one simple reason, and I can sum it up in one word: alignment. You see, back in April, Eric and I went down to San Antonio, Texas. There was a large church conference down there, and there were many, many pastors that represented congregations of our size, about 350, all the way up to 55,000 people. And one of the things that kept coming up with each speaker, they would always emphasize how important it was for not only the leadership to be aligned, but also the staff to be aligned with the leadership, and then the entire church to be aligned together, pointed in the same direction. So the funny thing about conferences is when Eric and I go to those, it always means more work when we come back. So we actually spent, the shepherds and the staff spent time seeing if we were aligned and what God wanted us to be aligned on. And it boiled down for us to be aligned on the Great Commission, which is what Jesus gives his disciples before he ascends into heaven. In Matthew 28:18 through 20, he says, "All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore, go make disciples of all nations, baptizing them into the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I'm with you to the very end of the age." And so it was funny because Eric actually gave all of us a pop quiz and to see if we knew that and had it memorized. And I would encourage you, if you don't have it memorized, to make that a part of your devotional time. But um, if you remember back a couple months, Eric's sermon series about reach, connect, equip, equaling disciple was his way of bringing what the shepherds and the staff had aligned themselves with, and then also helping the church body become aligned with all of that. So that's how Eric brought what our mission is uh, to the church. And there it is on the screen: reach plus connect plus equip equals disciple. Now, the reality is that we're coming off of the summer season of group life, and summers are crazy for everybody. And as a body, we have been pretty distracted with lots of things. And vision has leaked. The vision of the church is leaked. Being aligned together has leaked. And, that's okay. It's kind of what happens. It's normal. It's not as sharp as it could be. And that's the main reason for this training is to make sure that we are aligned and ready for the upcoming season. You know, we also have another danger to kind of look out for. People are by nature creatures of habit. We can get into routines. We can get into a rut. We can lose sight of the goal and just keep on doing the same things over and over again and forget why we're even doing them in the first place. We slip into tradition and ritual. We can kind of become Pharisees. What I mean by that is we can become worshipers of the system, going through the motions, rather than worshipers of the Creator. We need to be reminded often of the vision and why we do the things that we do throughout the season. That's everybody on every level, not just people that attend groups, but host homes, coaches. So important because we need to stay sharp and focused. So when you may receive emails from me or I drop into your group, you're not in trouble. I'm just trying to remind you and to encourage you. And this is a two-way street. I want you guys to know this because when I drop in to your group or I send an email out and you respond to me, you know what? You're encouraging me as well. You're reminding me of why I get up every morning and do this and what I've been called to do. So I really want you to know that. It's a two-way street. It's so important. Now, there's a couple of statements that Jesus and the Apostle Paul make that are critical, and I want to share them with you. The first one is love the Lord your God with all of your heart, all of your mind, all of your soul, and all of your strength. That's found in Luke 22. And the second one comes from the Apostle Paul in Romans 12. He says, I urge you, brothers and sisters, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices. This is your spiritual act of worship. Now, statements like these from Jesus and Paul imply that worship is much more than just going through the motions. It's an incredibly intentional act. And that's very, very important to remember because as a host home, you're part of making disciples here at Adventure. And disciple making is not something that happens incidentally or accidentally. It requires the Holy Spirit, focus, and doing things on purpose or intentionally. And I'm going to suggest to you guys that over the years, what I've learned is that it's best to do this as a team. And as a host home, you are a part of a core team with the coaches of your group. Now, this concept of a core team is super important for you to grasp. And I'll use a fishing analogy. I don't know if you guys have ever watched that show called River Monsters, but this guy, Jeremy, is probably one of the most effective anglers that I have ever seen. He is amazing. The stuff that he pulls out of rivers is incredible. And if you think about this for a minute, anglers are great. It's great to fish that way. But what's funny is net fishermen actually have a greater yield than an angler does. I don't care if you're the best angler in the world. And the problem is that often today in the church, we try to fish like anglers, individuals, by ourselves. And you can be the most effective angler in the world, but guys with the nets, they're always going to haul in more simply because they're working together as a team and covering more surface area than a single hook ever could. And besides this, net fishing is biblical. You're like, what do you mean, Jay? Well, let's think about this for a minute. How did Jesus do his ministry? First, he stated his mission publicly. Then he called a group together to go on mission with him. He taught them, he equipped them, he sent them out. Then he debriefed with them when they came back, and then he commissioned them. And all this was done in a group context. And if you think about this for a minute, after he stated his mission publicly, he called Peter to follow him. And he said, I will make you fishers of men. Now, who's he talking to here? Think about this a minute. Peter was a commercial fisherman who used nets. Peter and the other disciples would have naturally understood that they need to work in teams. They didn't think in terms like individualistic Americans do. They thought like communal Hebrews. And we really need to take this lesson to heart today and understand that teams are natural places for relational environments to occur, and it's the most effective way to make disciples. So again, thank you for being a part of this core team. This begs the question in my mind, though: did the lessons that Jesus taught the disciples, did they stick with them? Well, if we take a look at a couple of key passages in the New Testament, we can see that I believe that it did. One of my favorite passages to refer to often is Acts chapter 2, verses 42 through 47. This is after Peter just preached this amazing sermon about Jesus as being the Lord and the Messiah, and that he was crucified for our sins and he was raised from the dead. And the whole crowd was cut to the heart. and 3,000 people actually were baptized that day. And after all that happened, the scriptures record that all the believers devoted themselves. Devotion indicates being intentional about something, doesn't it? They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship and to the sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper, and to prayer. That sounds very much like what we do in Life to Life groups. A deep sense of awe came over them all, and the apostles performed many miraculous signs and wonders. And all the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. Then they sold their property and their possessions and shared the money with those in need. They worshiped together at the temple each day, met in homes for the Lord's Supper, and shared their meals with great joy and generosity, all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. And each day, the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved. You see, much of what we try to accomplish and have happen in Life to Life groups is modeled in what we see here in this chapter 2 of Acts. Now, I would say, based on what Jesus taught them about working together, being on a core team, and being intentional, was absolutely captured here. But let's look further down the pipe as Christianity spread out through the world into the Roman, throughout the Roman Empire, and even into Rome itself. Paul writes to a church here in his letter to the Romans in chapter 12, and he says this. He says, don't just pretend to love others. Really love them. Hate what is wrong. Hold tightly to what is good. Love each other with genuine affection, and take delight in honoring each other. Never be lazy, but work hard and serve the Lord enthusiastically. Rejoice in our confident hope, be patient in trouble, and keep on praying. When God's people are in need, be ready to help them. Always be eager to practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Don't curse them. Pray that God will bless them. Be happy with those who are happy, and weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with each other. Do not be too proud to enjoy the company of ordinary people, and don't think that you know it all. Never pay back evil with more evil. Do things in such a way that everyone can see you are honorable. Do all that you can to live in peace with everyone. And I shared this with you guys because this passage is key. We see that this is exactly what the Lord demonstrated and asked his disciples to do, and it was passed on. If you think of where Jerusalem is and where Rome's at, it got passed on over, 3 decades. The message is still consistent. Be intentional, love each other, be devoted to the things of God, and he will produce fruit in your lives. And that's so important to remember as we're making disciples on a core team. So reach plus connect plus equip equals disciples. You will see this over and over again. Please don't forget it. And as a host home, remember you play such a vital role in the core team of people that is on mission with Jesus here at ACC. You will help establish the relational environment where people can be reached and get connected with Jesus and others who follow him. And that's really why we pound that drum of reach plus connect plus equip equals disciple here. So let's go ahead and move on to the practical now. Now, none of what I'm about to say is rocket science, but it still is important and needs to be said so that there's a consistent message across the board for all host homes. I'm going to work right off the host home ministry description for the most part. So if you have that with you, go ahead and follow along. Let's go ahead and just start at the beginning. What is the purpose of a host home? I want to take a few minutes and talk in detail about this because it sets us up for the reasons behind the general guidelines that we have for host homes. So the purpose is to create an inviting environment for Life to Life groups to meet. It's pretty straightforward. And a while back I read a book about groups, And in this book, the gentleman was talking about different spaces where we can create to make discipleship opportunities happen. And much of what he was basing this off of was a study, some conclusions from a study of an anthropologist that identified what he calls fields of interaction and influence. And these are just in general, okay? So these gentlemen say that in public, you're 12 feet plus, your field of interaction and influence is pretty broad. You can be walking down the street and not encounter a lot of people. You're not going to have a lot of influence with them. You may not even acknowledge that they're around. And then he moves on to category. I can't say it. Never mind. He moves on to another category about being social, and the field of social interaction and influence is 4 to 12 feet. So you could have a little more. You could bump into someone at that range and have a little more contact with them. Then it gets into the field of personal, and that's 18 inches to 4 feet away. And if you think about this, this is usually where you're at with your friends and your family, right? And then there's the intimate field, which is 0 to 18 inches. And again, this is with family and stuff like that, and friends. But this is just your general fields of interaction and influence. But what if we went ahead and applied this to a small group setting, or in our case, a life-to-life setting? Well, if you look at this chart, what the author is trying to say here and make a point is he's saying that most people, when you invite them into your home, uh, we're really in the dark gray sections where there's fellowship and there's hospitality happening. And that's one of those, if you think about this as a new person, if you don't know someone, that can be a little bit intimidating, can't it? And I want you to really think like this as a host, because your purpose, remember, is to create an inviting environment for life groups to meet. So I want you to think about being a new person in your home. What are some things that you need to do to help them feel comfortable? And I think that's one of the biggest roles, biggest things that you can do to help make your life to life group successful. Because we want people to be able to get into the fellowship time and the hospitality ranges, which hospitality is a safe place for anyone to belong to your community. And we want them to have, once that's established, to have the times of fellowship where you can encourage one another in our lives with Jesus. So let's go ahead and move on and talk about the guidelines for host homes. The first set is really the physical aspects of it. The location doesn't need to be too far out from Adventure's main population or into a remote location. This is really just practical. It's not. It's not meant. We had one group that met way up Meadow Lake Road, and they were very discouraged sometimes because not a lot of people would show up, and they would invite and invite and invite. Well, people had a hard time finding it, and most of the people that go to Adventure live in McMinnville. We have some in Carlton and Lafayette and Willamina and Sheridan, but most of it is in McMinnville. So we want to make sure that it's not too far out or too far off the beaten path. Now, when it comes to size, really, each home has a capacity in it. Our groups typically range from 6 to 12 up to 14 people at the most. The average is 8. But each host home will need at least one room large enough to seat 6 to 12 adults. Additionally, if your group has children, the home may need to have another room where kids can safely play without being too big of a distraction to the group. Now, like when we started Adventure, we met in Eric and Laura's home, and we met in their living room, and then we had someone watch the kids out in the garage. And I remember Eric and Laura cleaning up the garage, putting a TV out there, and rolling carpet down on the floor each week in order for the kids to be able to play out there and have a good time. So when it comes to seating, if your furniture is limited in a host home, we have metal folding chairs or other portable furniture that may be used, and we'd love to help you get that situated and figured out. Um, and I want to talk a little bit about inviting. Your home needs to be inviting. Each host home needs to be a place where adventure families can and visitors can come. The meeting room of the host home and the bathrooms need to be clean, picked up, and otherwise ready for guests to come in and enjoy this. Um, as a rule of thumb, one of the things that you guys need to understand, I was a host home for years, and I still go fall back into that role. And I always, in my mind, I try to think, how would I get the house ready if Jesus were coming by? And I know that sounds cheesy, but I can't stress this enough. Um, Man, make sure that the living room is picked up and vacuumed. When it comes to bathrooms, make sure that there's a towel there. Make sure that the toilet paper roll is full, because that would create a very awkward situation. Let me tell you. Play some music, guys, softly in the background. That's fun to come into, and people, as you're talking and catching up with each other, light some fragrant candles, whatever sets up the atmosphere to make people feel invited and welcomed. Really pay attention to detail, and remember, try to put yourself as a first-time visitor in their shoes. See it through their eyes. That's really important. So just inviting. That's the important one. As far as atmosphere goes, let's talk about being prepared. Hosts should be ready for people to walk in at the stated times and not still be trying to clean when guests are arriving. Now, again, I've been there. I've done that. I've been the guy vacuuming 10 minutes before everybody shows up and we're scrambling because the kids made a mess. I have a very funny story to tell about I was hosting and leading the junior high boys group, and we had a cat that was very old, and she had actually been gone for many years, and she'd come home and she was in really bad health. Well, just before the boys show up, the cat decides to it's dying basically, and I had to. I mean, you can't even top that experience. We had to deal with that situation before the guys got there and everything. So, but it's so important. If that was an extreme case, there are oftentimes you don't have that problem, and you just need to be ready and prepared for people to show up, because it really does allow you then to focus on the people that are coming in, and also it allows your meeting to start on time, because we really need to respect people's time. And on a little note, a side note, I would also say people need to respect your time. If you have kids and stuff that need to get in bed because they got school the next day or whatever, make sure you share that with the group. Say, love you guys. If you're gonna stay and talk a little bit afterwards, that's fine, but not past such and such time. I need you to go be gone, and because I have to get my family in order. Don't ever be afraid to say that. It's very important. Friendliness. People in your group should be warmly greeted and offered a place to put their coats, the purses. If your group has children, you should offer to show the parent and the child where the kids are at and where they're playing, and all that fun stuff. And I want to say this: it's very important. If you're married and you have a spouse, um, or anything like that, the host has such a vital role in setting the tone, the atmosphere for the group. And I need you guys to be aware of that. If you're having an argument with your spouse before a group, um, that's going to be reflected in the atmosphere. So be mindful of that. If your kids aren't listening, that's going to be reflected in the atmosphere at first. So just be mindful of that, and remember, you're there to be friendly and be honest. Say, listen, we're having a hard time right now. Would you pray with us right now, please? That might be a great way to start your group, and then everybody knows. Now, the next thing, refreshments. It's not required, but are encouraged. I don't know what it is, but people love to gather around food. Um, and if you want to make your house smell great, hey, prepare some brownies or an apple pie or whatever you do. Don't feel obligated though to provide refreshments every week. I would encourage you to spread the responsibility, have the group sign up to bring cookies, vegetable trays, beverages, whatever. But having some refreshments there, especially when people are just getting off of work, it's kind of nice to have some things like that, and it really adds to the atmosphere. Now, the big ticket item that I want to talk about when it comes to atmosphere is children and pets. Okay, children are wonderful, and they need to be included in all of our groups, and that's my personal opinion. Some folks don't feel that way because there's a fine balance that you're trying to maintain when you have children in your group. Um, you don't want to exclude people with kids, but you also don't want the kids to become such a distraction that people are unable to concentrate on the lesson. As a host, you need to talk with your coach and have a solid game plan on what you're going to do with the children. Um, there are many, many creative ways to have children in your groups. And you know what it really boils down to? As a group, you guys decide what works best for you. I mean, you can hire a babysitter, you can have babysitting off site, the kids can join you and color quietly. It depends on the ages of the kids and things like that. But the bottom line is, you really want to figure out what works best for you as a group, and you don't always know that at first. It takes a little while to get things dialed in, and this can change during the season too, depending on if new people show up, different stages that children are in. For example, we had a little girl that was crawling, and by the end of the season, man, she was walking, and we had to change how we dealt with kids. Um, so plan on it. The issue with kids and or the conversation about kids being ongoing as a group. Don't be afraid to talk about it. Don't pretend that there's a 900-pound gorilla in the room and nobody wants to talk about it, because that really actually will kill a group pretty fast. So now let's talk about pets a little bit. If you have pets, please be sensitive to the reactions of others that come to your group. You love your pets, but others may be allergic to them or comfortable around them. Also, active pets can sometimes be a distraction to study and prayer time. So just be sensitive. Know where you want to put the pet, and help people understand that, and ask people. Let them know. Hey, are you okay with this? And because again, we don't want that to be a distraction. Now, this next thing on the host home ministry description is the host home cannot be a faith coach or the apprentice. If the host home desires to fill one of these roles, the group will need to find an alternate meeting place. Now, this particular guideline is not written in stone. We just discourage it because, like the slide says, multitasking, the art of doing twice as much as you should, half as well as you could. Um, we just discourage it. We want to help. Remember, the core team is so important, so we want to help spread that load out. So trying to do everything isn't always in your best interest. Now, the last thing on your ministry description is this, and I will say this, guys. These are key. Seriously, if you want to have a solid group experience, be committed to these 10 things. Make your group a priority. Okay. Uh, don't be inconsistent with your meeting. That always throws it off. You want to encourage everyone's spiritual growth. You want to support each other in times of need. You want to practice being sympathetic. You want to speak the truth in love. Please, please be honest with one another. Please be tactful in how you say things. If someone upsets you, talk to them about it. Don't just play it off and then forget. Don't ever go back to group again. And don't be petty. We're not in junior high anymore, guys. Keep confidences. Please, please practice confidentiality. Loose lips sink ships, I'm told. So be genuine. Please be genuine with everyone. Um, they say that the first 2 or 3 months of group, people are just getting used to each other, and it's absolute true. But and then you get to a point where you really do feel like you can be authentic with one another. So just be ready to practice that. Respect the differences that you have. People come in with all kinds of different opinions and lifestyles and things like that. So just respect that. Be humble. No one is perfect, and everyone has weaknesses. Number 9, forgive when hurt. Please, please. And if you need help working through this, come talk to your coach, talk to me, talk to Eric or Stacy. We can help you guys work through this and reconcile things. And support your group's purposes. Be united. Be one in your group as you guys determine what you want to do and accomplish as a group and what God's going to be doing there with you. And so the last thing I would say is we try to make it easy for people to be invited to group. We have a website uh, at adventurecc.net, and under the Connect tab, you can actually see which groups meet and when. And one of the features on this website is that people are invited to your group. They can go there and they can get directions from a Google map when and they can see the locations of where all the groups are at. Now, the only way that that's possible is if I get your permission. Your address isn't published on the website, but people can still see where you live. And if that's something that you're comfortable with, no problem. Just go ahead and indicate that on the ministry description there. If you're not okay with that, that's fine too. I won't put the location of where your group meets on the website if you ask me not to do that. And you can indicate that as well on your ministry description. So again, thank you guys so much for being a part of this. Thank you for being willing to uh, be part of the mission of Jesus. And I'm excited to see what God's going to do through you this year. Thanks.